Hello everyone, and welcome to another Thursday. That means it's a Gear Talk time. We are all here. It's the end of the year, which means it's time to announce the next series we'll be covering for the Gear Talks for 2024. So, I was trying to think of like a skit or something, and I remember I had like a Skull and Bones shirt for this, but I don't know where it is, so I just have black. And then I remembered, one of the characters we're going to be discussing for this series is a pretty heavy chain smoker. Well, I don't smoke, and I don't want to promote smoking on YouTube, so I don't have anything to smoke. So, here we are once again for this year's discussion series. It is going to be covering the Zeta Squad discussion series. That's right, we're doing Zeta Squad. I looked back at last year's video, and I saw like, maybe I'll do Kilo or Delta, and then I realized those are some pretty heavy hitters right there. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of the characters in Zeta are some heavy ones too, but in order to cover some of the bigger guys, I realized in that video I was correct. I would need some more time. And it just so happens for this series, I can kind of take care of everything. Yeah, there's some bigger guys, which I'll talk about in a moment, but mostly, it's not everyone who has a very large profile to them. For instance, the characters in Zeta Squad we'll be talking about are Valera, Kim, Ty, and also Barrick. And finally, we will also cover Jason this series, since I figured it's only right since he started becoming a gear after he met up with Zeta, and Zeta kind of inspired him to become one. So I figured that would be the best time to cover Jace in the story. I could always throw him in with like the Delta and like the minor Delta characters, which he does in 3 become a part of, but I figured Zeta is the right place because of everything that happens and the role it truly plays on Jace. With the Zeta Squad series, we are going to talk about a lot of the things that happen in the Shadow of Rom story. So, I don't want to do the Rom video yet. I want to save that for either the Locust discussion series or when I do get to Delta, because Rom is the main antagonist for a good chunk of the Delta story. Basically, the first game is all about Rom as the antagonist. When it comes to the Locust, he played a major role with the Locust, so I feel it is only right that Rom is actually saved. Now, I didn't do that with Ukon because I could fit Ukon in. His story is very heavily tied with the Gabe's Convoy discussion. Rom's, yes, he's the antagonist, but he has a lot bigger fish to fry later on than just who we have in Zeta. So we're going to do some talks involving Rom, but we're not going to touch on him specifically. So I'll come up with some ideas, some themed videos involving Rom, and we're going to throw that in. Also with this, we'll talk about Olima, where everything happens for Shadow of Rom, another big area for the story of Zeta. We're going to talk about that. I feel another thing to talk about, even though we're not getting Rom, I feel this is a good place to talk about the Krill, because the Krill, if you saw the Krill storm in Shadow of Rom, yes, this is something that needs to be talked about and addressed. This was the big, we gotta get out of here now reason they left. So, we're gonna talk about all of that, and I feel like Zeta's the good choice for this year, because you look at like the entire story of Gears of War, and you look at all the characters introduced and everyone who's there, and you have a lot of characters that make an appearance and leave. And by leave, I basically mean they die. There's not a lot of like getting around that one in Gears of War. So with all of these characters that die and pass away, or in Ty's case, choose their own ending, I feel it's right to talk about a group that came out that was kind of focused on that. So let me give you some background for what, if you're wondering what I'm talking about here. So when Gears of War 3 came out, the DLC for Shadow of Rom came out like a year and a half after. I think it was a little while. It wasn't like right away. So when it came out, the big focus was Zeta Squad and the characters you get with Zeta Squad. So the reason this was kind of like a big deal, these are all the characters up to this point in the story, Gears of War 3 to the ending, we know are gone, have passed away. Zeta Squad was basically, this is like the squad of the dead. That's how we saw it as a fandom. And I was there for that, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly what this is. All these characters that are introduced have passed. They're gone. Even Rom in the story, he's gone. There's no Rom anymore. Alima's been sunk. I'm not giving too many spoilers. This has been a while, though, but all the members, excluding Jace, because he was not an actual member of Zeta, have passed away and are gone. You even see one of the members go during the story of Shadow of Rom. You know, whether it be from the comics, from the stories, books, these characters are very fleshed out, and you know they're gone. So getting to have like one more hurrah with them was like a big thing. Like Barrick. Let's take Barrick and Ty, for instance. I'll talk about Barrick first because I love Barrick. Like, you see him go out in the comics, and it's this really huge, like, whoa, the way he went out. And we're going to talk about that in his video, but what he did, how he stood his ground, like he was infected with rust lung and he was still kicking ass and taking names. Like, you get to play as him now. Here's a story involving Barrick. You have Ty. I barely have to talk about Ty, and you know what I'm talking about. Ty was like this quintessential character in 2 who came in like, this is the pillar. Like, Marcus is holding up morale. This guy's holding up like the actual force. Like, when Ty was introduced, oh my goodness. You get a lot of him in the comics. You get a lot of him in the books even. Like, he comes up a lot. Like, he's not a prominent figure either, and that's the craziest thing. You have so much on Ty, but even in the Zeta story, if out of all 4 squad members, he's probably the one that speaks or does the least amount of all of them. And that's saying something, because it is Ty Caliso. Even to this day, his family name is still kicking in the world with Lonnie. He's, like, his family name is still around. That's how much people love Ty. Like, even Lonnie, it's like, yeah, she's the cousin of Ty. And everyone's like, pfft. Like, you see what I mean? You get characters like Kim. Kim is back. You know, you don't get a lot of them in the books except for maybe, like, an offhanded mention of a flashback. You get Kim, like, he comes up in the first game, and he's the original sergeant to Marcus when Marcus is brought out of prison. And he dies to Rom, and it is so perfect how they do it. A minor tangent, but we're talking about Zeta, so this is the perfect time to do it. And I made a video about this, the relationship between Kim and Rom, so if you want to hear more about this in detail, go check that out. But when this game came out, it was years and years and years after the first game came out, when Kim and Rom first had their first encounter, what we thought was their first encounter. So we see it mostly as Rom just taking out Kim. That's what we see. But Shadow of Rom is so good because when it comes to Kim and Rom, their interaction and story is so much deeper and it's so much heavier. It's so good. I love it so much. And when they did the Ultimate Edition, you truly see it in Rom and Kim, the way they act, the minor differences to the scene, the very astute details that are added. You see, this is not our first rodeo. This is not our first time we're going one-on-one. This is redemption for either side. And spoiler alert for what happens in the first game, Rom walks away with the W. But in Shadow of Rom, there's the real debate. Who really walked away with the win in Shadow of Rom? I've posed that question many times to many people, and I have gotten the answer, but I'm going to leave y'all throughout this entire series to come up to terms with that one. But getting over that tangent, you can see like these characters, they're very well developed with this story. You get like the fleshing out and the color added to their backgrounds. Like Ty already has it, Barrick does, but Kim, it adds a good amount to Kim. It makes me feel like it was a good decision to have Kim in this. You get Valera, whose brother is also mentioned later on about how he joined the army, or he's about to join the army. You learn Valera basically as an Easter egg is related to another character, and seeing Valera basically taking on, like, I don't want to say the mother figure, but more of like the tutelage portion, or like the defender of Jace when Jace was young and not ready to be a gear yet. She was basically the one that was like, I'm on babysitting duty for him. And to see that grow and how she is like his defender, kind of. And I'm not going to spoil what happens, but as things progress, you learn that, like, she always had hopes that Jace would become, like, something better than just some random civvy. Like, she always saw, like, this is someone who could be a good gear, you could say. And Barrick later on in the story even says, like, she'd be proud. She really would. And it's the relationships you get from here on out, too. Like, there's not a lot that really continue aside from, like, with Rom and some of the other characters. But, like, you have Barrick and Jace's relationship, which in the comics aren't touched upon that much because years later on, guess what? That's when they finally get to explaining their relationship. So when the comics happen, there's not a big, like, oh, it's Barrick. How are you doing? Because in the comics at that point, they didn't know each other. But now, by the canonicity and timeline of things, they did know each other at that time. I'm getting sucked into a rabbit hole here, a wormhole. But you can see what I mean. So it's just nice to see like these characters in this small little DLC. I believe the first ever story DLC that wasn't cut content. To have something like this where they took the time and effort into just a one-act structure of a story and fit it so perfectly with Zeta. I feel like these characters are very much owed, like, just explanations or, like, the love that they deserve for, like, this story that they presented us. Much like the Hivebusters. The story they gave us, in my opinion, was better than 5. So, I see it as, like, with Shadow of Rom, I don't think it was better than 3. Don't get me wrong, 3 was amazing. But when it comes to Shadow of Rom, these characters put in the legwork to have it where you care about these characters. I finished that DLC the first time ever almost a decade back. I truly care for all 5 of these characters that went through this story. And I originally was not a big fan of Jace. I didn't care much for Jace. This story changed my mind. So it's going to be nice to talk about all the characters and go through their stories and just cover everything that led to the Zeta Squad that was formed and what happened after they all left Zeta. Because their story does not end with Zeta. No, many of the characters leave to go to other squads or go to do other things. Jace, for instance, is a child during all of this. He still has to enlist. He's not even with the COG. So, if you have one character going off, what happened to everybody else? We're going to cover all of that 2024. So, I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank everyone for making this possible. And thank the patrons for making this possible. I have high hopes for 2024. I cannot wait to talk about Zeta. I was making my list, and I'm like, I think Zeta has to be the one. I was down to a few of them, and I just bunkered down on, here it is. It has to be Zeta. I'm feeling Zeta is 2024. Then after Zeta, we'll go on to some other discussions, but I want Zeta. We are talking about Zeta. Y'all get Ty Kaliso finally, okay? We've been waiting on the Ty video since I did the Franklin one. Yes, we are finally going to do the Ty Kaliso video, okay? Y'all gonna be happy now? Y'all gonna get off my back for Ty's video? I've had a few people in the past few years ask about it. Yes, we're doing Ty. I love y'all to death. I hope everyone had a great December. Can't wait to see you for the new year. I'll catch you then. Later.